The chair of New Zealand's largest company, Fonterra, has quit for health reasons. John Wilson has been chair of the dairy giant cooperative since 2012, and prior to that was on the board of the dairy giant. But today Fonterra announced he stepped down after undergoing a serious operation that will need continuing treatment. Here's our Rurals reporter, Maya Burry.
We're the first in the world to see the sunrise. First to get up and get amongst it. A cooperative of farming families.
More than 10,000 farming families, as endorsed by former All Black Richie McCaw in this ad, supply milk to the global dairy giant. But today there was a departure from the Fonterra family's leadership, with its chair, John Wilson, stepping down after 6 years. Waikato dairy farmer and Federated Farmers Dairy spokesperson Chris Lewis says Mr Wilson had steered the company through many difficult times.
He's had plenty to deal with and a lot of challenges chucked his way. It's a constant changing game being in the dairy business, and yeah, he's gone with the flow and dealt with it. So certainly been a challenging time for him. During his term, John Wilson was faced with a false food poisoning scare, threatening to undermine vital trade with China, which led to a $183 million damages payout to the French dairy company Danone. That helped depress its bottom line, with the cooperative in March reporting a $348 million loss for the first half year. An extra problem is the thicket of government rules and regulations dating back to the company's creation in 2001, which are now up for review. Analyst Irvin Reimer of Harbour Asset Management says whoever takes over from John Wilson will need to have those rules relaxed if Fonterra is to do well.
There's going to be some really tricky issues to run the business going forward, because they still have capital structure problems that aren't going away. Now they're facing declining milk volumes, they're losing market share to independent processors, and it is not obvious to me how this can be addressed without some pretty good shake-up of the dairy industry.
In March, Fonterra's chief executive, Teo Spearings, announced he would leave his $8 million job later this year. His replacement has not been announced, but the board has moved quickly to replace John Wilson, handing the role of chair to John Monaghan, who has been on the board since 2008. Fonterra dairy farmer John Gregan, who milks just over 1,000 cows in South Canterbury, says he's surprised at Mr Wilson's sudden departure, which isn't ideal while Fonterra is still looking for a new CEO.
Would have been better if John had been able to stay on for longer and the new CEO had been put in place before we saw changes also, as chairman of the board. So it's not ideal, but we'll accept that. John Monaghan, who's replaced John at the board, is very experienced. He's been on the board for a long time, so we're not losing too much there as far as experience goes anyway.
South Taranaki Mayor Ross Dunlop, who is also a dairy farmer, says Fonterra has a major impact in the area, given the number of local dairy farms and 3 factories that employ thousands of people. He hopes when a new team comes on board, they will focus on improving the public perception of Fonterra.
I'd be very supportive of, upping the game in that area. There is a lot of work going in with liaison with farmers, with riparian planting, environmental issues, that does tend to get a little bit unrecognised, within the media, etc. There's a lot more to be done as far as the perception of Fonterra, particularly in the urban communities in New Zealand.
Last month, the Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones hit out at Fonterra, saying it was disconnected from the farming community and John Wilson should follow the CEO out the door. Mr Jones couldn't be reached for comment today. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.